My name is Farris WWI and I will be talking about the Second World War. Here is my grandma and I will be asking questions about the Second World War. How old were you at the start of the Second World War?
8 years old.
Where did you live?
I lived in a small town to the north of Manchester.
Were you evacuated?
No, I wasn't evacuated. It was rather strange. We were not evacuated, but people were evacuated to our area. And on the street just behind me, the children there were, because it was just that little bit nearer Manchester.
Did you know anyone who got evacuated? If so, who?
Children came to our school, 2 girls and a boy. They were all cousins, but they went to the same place. The lady they went to stay with was not very nice to them. She didn't give them much to eat. So they used to come to my house often. And I'm still very friendly with one of the girls. She's called Farris WWI WWII, and she lives in London. We used to visit each other after the war. I still write to her. She was the curator of the Greenwich Maritime Museum in London.
Did you have to go into a shelter?
Yes, we had a shelter at home in the garden at the back, which my father and a neighbour dug, and that had a metal corrugated roof, and there was soil put over the top of it, so it looked rather as though it was just part of the garden. It was quite deep. We went down steps to go into it at night. Most of the air raids were at night, and our parents used to take us out. Sometimes we were asleep, sometimes nearly asleep, and we used to wear what were called siren suits. They zipped up to keep us warm, had a little hood on as well. We slept in there until the air raid was over. Sometimes we slept there till morning.
Were there different kinds of shelters?
Yes, there were lots of different kinds. We had a different, bigger shelter to take the children at school. Some people had one that was just under a reinforced table in their house.
Did you have to go to school when the bombs were falling?
Well, we wouldn't go actually when the bombs were falling, but we were often there when an air raid took place.
Were you scared a lot?
Well, we didn't really think about it all that much, unless the children whose houses were destroyed. Yes, of course, they would be, because they were in more danger, really.
Did any bombs fall near your house?
Not at the house where I lived when I was small, but after I was 10, we moved to a house nearer to Manchester. It was our house, just had the windows blown out on one side. The next house had all its windows blown out, and the ones after that were completely destroyed and the people were killed.
Could you tell me about rationing?
Yes, we all had a ration book. We had just 2 ounces of certain things and 4 ounces of others, but it was fair really, because everybody got the same amount, except that if you were very rich, you could go and stay in hotels for just a few days and then move on to another one. So some people did that, and they didn't have to use their ration books for that. So that was a little bit unfair. But the rest of us didn't do without the basic things. And children were very well looked after, because they had special rosehip syrup, orange juice, cod liver oil, all sorts of things like that.
What foods did you miss the most?
Well, we had a very small allowance for sweets, but lots of children, their grandparents would give them their rations of sweets. Unfortunately for me, my granddad absolutely loved sweets, so quite often it ended up without giving him some.
Did you believe that Britain would win?
Well, we always did, actually, because I remember my father saying, if the Germans invade and get up to the north of England, we'll all go and live in the Pennines. And if they come onto the Pennines, we'll all go up to Scotland, so don't worry, eventually we shall win.
Did you know anyone who went to fight in the war?
Yes, my father was called up, but after quite a short time he was recalled to be manager of an engineering works, doing special work for the Navy. And my mother had a cousin who was taken prisoner by the Japanese, and he was killed.
Did your mother have to work?
Just near the end of the war, she worked very briefly in a factory, and afterwards as a secretary in a factory that made munitions.
How old were you at the end of the war?
I was 14 at the end of the war.
So that must have been a very long war.
It was 6 years.
What did you do on VE Day?
I was very lucky because I was in London visiting my friend Barbara Wellard that I mentioned earlier, because our families had become friends. So we all went up to the centre and we all stood outside the palace in huge crowds shouting, "We want the king, we want the king," until they came on the balcony. And after that there were parties everywhere, and the last thing I remember is we were sitting on the steps of St Paul's when suddenly it was floodlit for the first time, because we had no lights, no street lights or anything like that during the war, and suddenly all the lights went on.
These are 2 helmets from the Second World War that my grandma found in her attic when she bought the house. These 2 helmets have been in the museum, and if you can clearly see, this is the smaller of the 2 helmets. We think that it belonged to a boy from a military band. If you look really closely, there's an R and the F. That stands for République Française. This is a picture of my granddad, Daniel Pearson Lees. He was in the army in 1945, but the war finished just before he was sent out. He did, however, spend several years in Germany as part of the occupying force. This is a ration book. It was my granddad's when he lived in Newcastle. It's interesting because it's dated 1953, 8 years after the war finished. There is still rationing. It was issued by the Ministry of Food. It listed meat, eggs, fat, cheese, bacon, sugar and milk as the food items that were rationed. Here are some interesting postcards and photographs I have found. This is a picture of my great-great-uncle Abraham. He was 18 and is wearing his Cheshire Regiment uniform in preparation for going off to war in France. He died a few weeks later in 1918. This is my great-great-granddad, Joey Hopkinson, in 1916 in his uniform. And here he is, again, with other soldiers. The postcard mentions that we are going tomorrow to France. And this postcard shows the armistice signatories on 11th November 1918. It is original as it has a stamp on the back. Thank you for watching my video. I really hope you enjoyed it.